and welcome to one of a couple different Christmas Evesodes from Prose. This first one is going to be just a touch different than normal. I am offering up to you again, for your listening pleasure, Guðrún in the Darkness. This was our Halloween special that was actually Christmas Eve themed, so I thought, hey, why not? I had a blast reading it, producing, etc., so for this first special for Christmas Eve 2020, how about a revisit? One more time, again. Here is Guðrún in the Darkness, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee.
Guðrún and the Darkness, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. The solstice was tomorrow night, and Guðrún was busying herself to prepare for the ultimate horrors that would come before the celebrations of Yuletide. They had survived for 13 straight nights of annoyance, and would have to continue to put up with those annoyances past the turn of the new year. A few days past, in fact. But all the Yule lads that had come forth from their cave-studded home in the lava fields of Dimmuborgir were not anything compared to the terror that was their mother and her pet. And those two were coming. As if Guðrún and her fellow villagers hadn't been obsessively keeping track of the days bordering the solstice and the Yuletide, the Yule lads popping here, there, and yon alerted them to the impending terror. Their obnoxiousness was just that. But all those pranks and problems were almost worth the additional reminder of the countdown to horror. Almost 13 days out, Stekkjarstor showed up to poke and prod and harass the sheep. From then on, every day brought another one of his brothers. Another one of her issue. Giljagor, the milk thief. Stufur, the crust eater. Thoras Lakir, the spoon licker. Padaskafil, the leftover addict. Askalakir, the bowl lapper. Hutharaskelir, the door hammer. Skurgamur, the lover of yogurts. Bjugna Kraiker, the sausage swiper. Glugagaigir, the window peeper. Gata Pfeiffer, the doorway sniffer. Ketkrokur, the meat burglar. And Kurtasnikir, the candle poacher. Guðrún always thought that Kurtasnikir was the most nefarious of the Yule lads. Many thought of him as a simple eater of tallow, a poor bestial being that was so hungry that he had to debase himself to eat candles for the 13 days he was loosed on the world just in order to survive. Guðrún saw him for what he was, though. Kurtasnikir was a stealer of light, a burglar of dreams, a dacoit that took with him the hopes and dreams of those hoping for warmth and brightness on the darkest night of their year. He was the antecedent to the coming of his mother and her creature. Kurtasnikir was the seemingly ambivalent herald of the horrendous, of true darkness and death. Looking out of the window into the horizon, Guðrún saw the last embers of the day smoldering. The night was coming. In some of the books brought by sailors, she had read that, in other places on the mainland so far away across the ocean, there were protectors of the people on these dark nights. Saints and elves and benevolent beings that took pity on humanity and fought for them when the demons and devils slid out to take children and seduce women and harass and harangue men. As far as Guðrún knew, no kind beings were on the islands to protect her and her family. Ísland and her residents had to fight through the gloaming alone. They had to stay wary of Dimmuborgir, the very Helvetes Katakomber, or catacombs of hell. The line between the waking world and hell was always thin there, with all the holes to the infernal realms. But tonight was, to Guðrún and her kind, the thinnest. Grula was coming, Grula and her Yule cat. The damned beast sounded less than he was. The feline was something truly born of hell. On the eve of the true Yule cat would come forth alongside Grula. He would slink through the towns and villages and cities of Eastland as the shadows grew. Tonight was the night he would feed for his biggest meal. He loved the smell and the taste of the weathered people of Eastland. Over the years of the predator coming to take her people, they had come to realize that all things new and bright and shiny repulsed the Yule cat. So it had come to be tradition for the wool merchants and seamstresses and mothers of the island to work doubly hard around Christmas time in order to ensure that everyone had something new to wear that terrible night. Sweaters, socks, hats, scarves, blankets. Every woman, man, and child put something on that was new and special for that Christmas Eve night with the sole purpose of turning the nose of the Yule cat. Grula, though, was another matter. The Yule cat's horrendous mistress was no stranger to the world on darker nights. She could come for the children of the world at any given time, depending on whether those children were putting true emotion into their prayers and giving true reverence to their elders or not. But again, on this night, where the borders between the devil's realm and the mother's earth were so thin, Grula had more free range to roam. She would come down from her infernal cave in those infernal mountains and actively hunt the children of Eastland. Her cat might get choked up on newly acquired items made with the love and care of others, but Grula had no such hang-ups. She could always sniff out irreverent children. Tromping quietly for such a large ogress of a woman, Grula would snatch children off the streets, from their rooms through the windows, or from other impossible places, like the very beds of their parents, to toss in her sack and take back to Dimmuborgir. There, she would snack on the children fresh and raw while she stewed others and cured the meat of others still. The massive giantess had no heart to break at the plaintive wails of the children, many yowling and crying that they had done nothing bad and that they had been truly respectful and genuine in their dealings and their prayers. She had eaten 2 of her own husbands, so bad little brats whom she sniffed out as being ripe with evil and darkness themselves, as her prey, were not going to find any forgiveness. In fact, her most recent husband, enduring her as a wife, Lepaludi himself, enjoyed the meals she cooked too, what little she would share with him. Legends held that Grula and Lepaludi had actually eaten all the children she'd had with those 2 other husbands. Their hunger was always great, and they were always ready to feed. And tonight was their night. Guðrún looked out the window into the horizon again. The light was almost gone. They would be coming soon. She made her way around the small 3-room hut of a home one last time to check the preparations. Her mother and father had entrusted the final check to her. Anna, her mother, had already finished the sewing, and everyone was wearing their new socks, scarves, and hats. This year, their color theme had been red, a deep burgundy red, and the whole family thought the new clothes a treat fit for royalty. Einar, her father, had placed scraps for all the Yule lads out and away from the house. In particular, the whole family had put the final stubs of their candles lit and hundreds of meters away from their home not too terribly long ago. Krtasnikir would come and steal those lights to feed himself. Let him leave their lights in their home be. And her little brother? Her little brother Christian was doing what any young one should be doing tonight. He was praying in their room, loudly and ardently, with passion and clarity, and with a fervor that only a child who'd lost friends to Guðrún would. The doors were latched and secured. The windows were closed and latched, save this last one. Guðrún closed and latched it too, knowing that the dying of the sun for the night was now simple moments away. Guðrún and the Yule Cat would begin striding toward them even now. Right now. Decoys out? Check. Offerings out? Check. Prayers and beggings of forgiveness? Ongoing. She had to get to hers, but wait. Her ears sought what was off. Mother and father had gone to sleep, knowing they would need to wake with the dawn to help friends and relatives recover from this night of shadow. She could hear their gentle breathing. But Christian? She could no longer hear his prayers. Guðrún hurried to their room. There she only found his new red scarf and his new red hat. The churlish child had taken them off before he left. The window was open. At least he had his socks to stave off the Yule Cat. She cried out to her mother and father and went to unbar and fling open the door. As soon as she unbarred it, her Thascalir, the door slammer, pushed it with all his might, slamming it open. The hearth fire went out. The cottage was plunged into darkness. Her parents yelled out to her over a growing gale inside the cottage. "Find your brother, Guðrún! Do not hesitate here! We shall defend the home against the Yule lads and stay in case Christian returns!" So Guðrún ran and ran. It was only just the evening hour. Surely Guðrún couldn't have leaned too heavily hard into her fell purposes early, surely. Guðrún sprinted past the perimeter where the gifts and decoys had sat. They were all gone. The lights were all put out. Her mind raced too. Christian must have heard those damned Yule lads clipping and tapping at his window. Glugagagir, the window peeper, must have come to steal from Christian, encouraged him to come out and play, and oh God. Guðrún came closer to town, but it was bathed in darkness too. Even in that black, though, she could see what she had prayed that she would not. She could make out the silhouette of a massive cat, its tail flipping as it played with some man it had caught. That man himself must have been well over 6 feet tall, and the Yule Cat batted him about, claws extended, slicing the poor man deeply as he was flopped this way and that. His life's blood was draining from him, and he was barely wailing at this point. But God, the horror. Guðrún stopped and vomited up her dinner down onto her shoes. The disgusting scene of the man being shredded and toyed with was enough for her to lose her meal. But the other silhouette was that of an impossibly large woman. If her inhuman size was not enough for Guðrún to recognize the ogre Guðrún, the task she was busying herself with left no doubt. Guðrún saw her with half of a child in each hand. The small body had been torn in half down the middle and was dripping and steaming, its warmth leaving into the frigid night air. The stars and moon had all but fled, but there was still enough light to see that hellish tableau. And enough light for Guðrún to see the red wool socks on the feet of what had once been Christian. The monstrous lifted one of the halves of her little brother and gleefully threw her head back, tossing the left half of the child in the air, playfully catching it in her massive craw. The crunching and squishing and chuffing sound coming from her as she chewed made Guðrún almost throw up again. But she had nothing left in her belly. Now her anger grew and vomited out instead. Guðrún bellowed out a wordless challenge, unthinking as to how she might be able to fend off two monsters of her own. The challenge got their attention, to Guðrún's terror. The Yule Cat stopped gnawing at the corpse of the large man and bounded over toward Guðrún. He sniffed and circled her, but made the same coughing noise one might expect out of a house cat trying to rid itself of a hairball. The beast retreated behind Guðrún. Her mother's knitting with love had worked. Guðrún, on the other hand, approached all bloody grins.
"Well, child, if I'm not mistaken, you're the sister of this little snack. I needed a little something to tide me over before I had to start preparing the meats for the season. He was yummy."
Guðrún wanted to talk back. Guðrún wanted to fight. But her fright had come up. It had risen above her and had seized her, and she was still. She couldn't move, she couldn't scream. Guðrún continued her approach, the bloody right half of Christian still dripping in her left hand.
"So you see, girl, I'll wolf down the rest of this morsel, but then I need to save the rest of tonight's findings until I get home. Yes, I have more children already, hon. I work fast tonight. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I heard some terrible, horrible words coming out of your mouth just now as you raced down the footpath, that little girl. And even that is a lie unto itself, isn't it, Guðrún?"
The villain spit out Guðrún's name like it was a vile curse.
"You gave your maidenhead to Magnus, the fisherman's son. What was it? A month ago? Tut tut. Whore's meat always has an off taste. But I guess that just means that Lepaludi and I will have to cure you into jerky with the rest of the fowler takings from tonight."
With that, Guðrún found her legs again and turned to run backward toward her home. But too late. Guðrún was faster. Her left hand shot out and took Guðrún's feet out from under her, and with one deft toss, Guðrún sent Guðrún head over heels into the air. The giant woman turned, grabbed her sack, and lifted it wide, catching Guðrún on her tumble back down to earth. In the sack, Guðrún smacked against both soft and hard. She quickly realized the contents of the sack were moving, writhing. There were others. They had been caught too. They all fought to get out, clawing at one another, biting one another. They all wailed for their mothers and fathers. Yet, Guðrún had not heard the cries outside the sack. Magic. It must be demonic magic. Guðrún tried to climb out of the top where she could see a sliver of what she thought was light, but the laces were pulled and that sliver disappeared. She was plunged into absolute darkness. Guðrún thought of Magnus and the night of passion they'd had. It had been so much fun. She didn't love Magnus, but he knew how to work between her thighs. Was it worth it, though? Was it worth this? The old tales said that coupling was nothing to shy away from, a gift from the gods. But those new tales coming out of Rome, those new tales that had brought the resurrection and the Yule and the devil himself, they said it was one of the ultimate sins. Farther down from the sack, rather muffled, Guðrún heard a boy's voice. Magnus's voice.
"Guðrún! That is you, it must be. At least we'll be together again.
Guðrún realized her folly. She not only didn't love Magnus, she hated him. She couldn't stand him. He loved her and she loathed him. She'd used him. And the stink of that was what made Guðrún long even now to strip her bones and cure her meat. She began keening, mourning the loss of her little brother and the prolonged perdition yet to come. Thank you for listening to Guðrún in the Darkness, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. All sounds you have heard come from YouTube's free audio library, freesound.org, or are of my own creation. The sounds that came from the two websites are being used under CC 01.0 public domain dedication licenses.
Well, that does it. That's one of a couple Christmas Eve specials tonight. By all means, it was a little different, right? I do hope you enjoyed Guðrún in the Darkness again, and all of its Halloween goodness. It was just too fun for me not to repost, now that it really is Christmas time. Please do refresh your feeds for yet another fun-tastic, and a little more calm and quiet and reflective Christmas Eve special from Prose.